When I first started, I ran super lean. I mean, really lean. When we talk about financially, I had just come off of a divorce. I lived with my sister, slept on her couch for a couple of months, and was figuring out what I was going to do. And because money was such a pain point, it had been growing up and then going through a divorce, it continued to be. I decided that I would turn this into one of the greatest successes in my life. Welcome back to the Women of Fort Mill podcast. My name is Leah Williams, and I'm so excited to be with you here today. Several weeks ago, Kelly and I decided that we would do a few solo episodes, choose different themes. So Kelly has focused on things that have impacted her life, especially in the health and wellness space, how she's been able to help women change their lives in such an impactful way. I love listening to hers, and mine is a little bit unique. I'm going to go pretty deep and personal on this first one, but I think that a lot of women will resonate with the message. In my experience in talking with women, there's a lot of crossover in how we feel about relationships, money, ourselves, learning to love ourselves. And so I think there will be some points that you can take away and that will hopefully be inspiring and encouraging to you. So I will take a few steps back. Some people know a few of these details about me, and some people don't because they are so personal. But when people see that I'm in the financial industry and I've been in the industry for 10 years, there's typically a lot of assumptions about that, whether you've always known these things, you've always been financially stable and ahead of the game. People assume a lot of different things. 10 years ago, that was not me. And in fact, not only rebuilding financial house, but emotional relationship with myself. And honestly, the most important thing was rebuilding my entire mindset around how I saw life and myself. So I'm going to kind of walk you through what roadmap I created for myself to completely turn around essentially every area of my life. And it's a process, as we all know. It doesn't happen overnight, but there are a few things that made an incredible impact, especially on the financial side. So people always ask, what should I be doing? What are some tips? What is the secret to this? And the thing is, there is not one right path. Many times there are multiple paths to get to the same destination. What determines what path we should be on is our life, our skills, our preferences, our resources, things like that. And that's what determines what path we should take. So I'm just going to dive in. This theme for the next couple of weeks are moments that made me. So I'm going to be bringing on a guest, a couple of ladies that have dramatically impacted my life. But for this first one, I thought I would start with money, meaning, and starting over. So when I first started, I ran super lean. I mean, really lean. When we talk about financially, I had just come off of a divorce. I lived with my sister, slept on her couch for a couple of months, and was figuring out what I was going to do. And because money was such a pain point, it had been growing up and then going through a divorce, it continued to be. I decided that I would turn this into one of the greatest successes in my life. So some of you have read a little bit about my story and seen that I dove head in, learned everything that I possibly could. I have never stopped taking classes and getting licenses since I started 10 years ago, but I was obsessed with learning what can I do to change my life so that this area of my life is no longer a pain point. And it is for so many people. So what I learned, and I typically learn the hard way, I'm the kind of person that typically has to make a mistake and then I never make that mistake again. So what I learned is that investing in the right people, most importantly yourself, both time and money, is the best thing that you can do. If you can increase your value meter, you will never have to worry about money. So I embrace that. And early on, I remember going to the store and thinking, okay, for the $37 left in my bank account, and this is 25. Okay, great. Debit card's going to go through. But every dollar I spent outside of the basics was intentional. It was spending money on people or spending money on learning. And if it wasn't going to increase my value add in some way, I didn't spend money on it. So that's what I mean when I say I ran really lean for a while. What I also learned is you have to take risks. And risk looks different to every person. Everyone has a different appetite for risk. I know it is different when you have children and when you don't. 10 years ago, I did not have any children, had a different life. So I understand that things look different when you have other little people relying on you. But when I looked at my opportunities and the skills, the gifts that I had, and how resourceful I could be, that's what started to change things for me monetarily. I knew that savings was important. I knew that not having a lot of debt was important. But as I changed my mindset, I started to understand not all debt is bad and that assets are the key. Once you have assets, you can acquire more assets. So that means you have to work as hard as you can to get that first asset. For me, that was my house. I took a loan against my 401k. I bought the house. Then I took a loan against the house a couple years later to invest in what would most people call a speculative investment. And it paid off well. And that's what started the compounding, is running lean. Only money I spent was on myself, learning, adding value, or in others. I believe in gifting. That's one of my love languages. And I think that it's important to invest in other people, show them that you love and care about them without expecting anything in return. So anytime I spent money, it was, okay, is this going to help me learn more, add more value to clients, or am I going to invest in someone and let them know how much I care about? Because relationship is currency. Our skills are our greatest assets. And when you have those two things, there is really nothing you can't do. And it took me years to unlock that part of this mindset shift that, yes, I am deserving. Yes, I can determine what my future looks like. There's going to be challenges. We all know that, but the challenges are meant to be there to help me become the woman I am supposed to be. I don't love going through these challenges. They are very hard, but they have shaped me. They've prepared me to be in this position. And so I'm grateful for them. So when people ask what's the secret to building wealth, you can really break it down to acquire assets so that you can build on them and continue the snowball of acquiring more and more assets. And that means that you're going to have to take on debt, but it's going to be good debt. Everyone talks about leverage. That's what leverage is. It's having access to things so that when an opportunity presents itself, you can jump on it, especially when other people are afraid. Whether it's in the stock market, it's down. In COVID, in March 2020, people were pouring money in. 6 months later, their accounts looked incredible. And so you had one group of people doing that, and then you had another group of people that thought the world was going to be over, go to cash, sell everything, and they ended up losing quite a bit. So obviously, when you take risk, it's got to be calculated. You have to know, worst case scenario, can I still pay my bills? And then, of course, if you have a family, if you have children, you've got to factor that in. So it's calculated, but you do have to take on the risk. So, fast forward, thinking about how life looks now, I think about every decision that brought me to this point and some of the best decisions that I made. Well, I will say the number one decision that served me well was changing how I viewed myself. And it's an ongoing journey. But once I embraced my values, skills, capabilities, and embraced the fact that there was nothing that I couldn't do with hard work and being resourceful. Once I did that, fear subsided and I just head down and built and haven't stopped since. So the other part of this is there is some sacrifice involved. To me, I would rather sacrifice for what in the grand scheme of things is just a few years and have so much more freedom later on than have a continual mediocre lifestyle. That is my opinion. There's no right or wrong. That is the thing about planning, is you get to choose. You get to choose what decisions you want to make today. And as long as you know what's on the other side of that decision, you have to be okay with that. That's why I think education is such an important part, because once you know what all of your options are, the pros, the cons, now there is no, we can't be victims of our lives. We know that I make this choice. I expect this outcome. For me, I chose to sacrifice a lot of the things. I chose to focus on creating more security, acquiring assets versus vacations. And while I have many friends that will say, Leah, you've got to use your passport. You've had it for 10 years and you've never used it. I chose to not do a lot of the things that everyone around me was doing because I felt like I had a lot of time to make up for. So, and this is probably a good point to say, this is not financial advice. This is just for education, entertainment purposes. But I do think it's important, especially for women, to know if you feel like, okay, my spouse is working, I'm a stay-at-home mom. The only way for us to save more, pay off debt, or do some of the things that we want is going to be to bring in more income. I think every single woman carries an enormous amount of skills, and the majority of them can be monetized. So it's about creativity and resourcefulness. Most successful women that I have met didn't have handouts. They had no one helping them along the way. They just had those two things, creativity, and they were super resourceful. So that's what I'm always looking for. I'm also looking for people to start a business to create some tax incentives for themselves as well. So when you think about starting with mindset, going from scarcity for some people, and some people don't struggle with that at all, more to a strategic mindset where you see yourself as one of your best assets. And if the goal is to acquire more assets, how do I start with myself, monetize the skills that I have to acquire funds to buy my first asset? How do I loan against that to buy my next one? And so on. Some people do this just with real estate. I've done it in several different ways with different kinds of assets. So like I said, there's many different paths to get to the same destination. If the goal is freedom and less stress around finances and money, generally there's a lot of ways that you can get there. So in thinking about what adds value, what are the decisions that I made, what are the mistakes that I made, I would say one of the biggest mistakes that I made very early was believing that I had to prove my value to everyone. I didn't believe initially how much value I had. And so I thought I had to prove it to everyone. And when you're constantly trying to prove something, you become a people pleaser. You discount your own feelings on things because it is always about what other people think, not what you think about yourself. So that was probably one of my biggest mistakes, is seeing myself do that over and over again. But I learned my lesson, and along the way had quite an enormous self-discovery journey. So those mistakes had a purpose, but looking back, when I think about the Leah of 10 years ago, sometimes I think, gosh, I just want to hug her and tell her all the things that she's believed her whole life, how most of them are not true. So I know I've hopped around a little bit. My whole goal in sharing some of this was to hopefully inspire and encourage any woman listening that no matter where you find yourself, whether you're coming out of divorce, you're coming out of loss, you're coming from a family that maybe no one had a really high bar for themselves, and so you want a better life, and what steps do you take to obtain that, wherever you're at? Or you're a mom doing the hardest job in the world and thinking, gosh, I want more in life. I want more for my family. How do I do that? I truly believe that there's always a way. There's always a way. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be a really easy path, but I do believe that we choose this life that we live. And while I think some of the hard things we've been through, we're like, oh, I don't think I would have chosen to go through this. It's always on the other side that we see all the benefits and the good that came out of it. So my biggest thing is focus on value, adding it, creating it, being it. Leverage your skills, your relationships, your story. People that you want in your circle truly care about you, your heart, and what makes you who you are. And you've got to be willing to take strategic risks. One of the most important things is investing in yourself. And sometimes it does mean sacrifice. It means change, and change is uncomfortable. We all know that. So embracing those things, believing that you have everything that you need to create the life that you want, doesn't mean that you don't employ help. It doesn't mean that you don't learn things, educate yourself. In fact, that's vital, necessary. Money's powerful, but it's really the meaning that makes it important, the meaning behind what you can do with money, because money is just a tool to resource. So I appreciate you tuning in. I hope that one of these many examples that I have given of my life, some of the things that I did really well, some of the mistakes that I made, that it is encouraging to you. And my goal, what fills my cup, is making an impact and adding value to others. And I've been super blessed to have incredible women be in my life who have added value to me. I think it's our calling to give back. If we've received wonderful blessings in our life, it's only right that we give back and invest in the lives of others. So thank you for tuning in to Women of Fort Mill podcast. Kelly and I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. I am so excited about some of the guests that we have coming up. 2 women that I'll have coming up I have on the podcast in a couple of weeks. That truly changed my life. And I think yours will be changed even through listening to them for 15, 20 minutes. So please share this with a friend if you think it would be impactful to them. Share our page, comment. Please feel free to send Kelly and I a message on topics that you would love to hear about. We would love to support you in any way that we can. We have some exciting things coming up for the holidays, days of giving, and supporting local women-owned businesses. And we also have some exciting news coming up for January. So thank you again, and I will see you next time.